Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another interview at the Inner Changemaker. So excited to be here with you guys once again. Every single week, we try to bring you some of the most interesting and best humans that I can possibly find. Some of them are within my network. Most of them are not. But before we dive into today's episode, I've got a couple questions for you guys. Are you ever scared of expressing yourself? Heck, I know I've been there many times. And are you ever scared of sharing your message with the world and you're not exactly sure how to position it or even be able to speak about it? Well, in this episode, we're going to hit on this exact topic because my guest today is essentially famous for helping some of the very best entrepreneurs to help share their message with the world. She's worked with people like a JJ Virgin, a Stu McLaren, Jeff Walker, and people that have been on the show, such as Jason Gaynard or Alex Sharfin, has really gushed over her. So I had to have her on. She's done some amazing talks. She does talks literally all around the world. She's on PBS specials. She has a movie that's coming out by South by Southwest, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And she's really, I remember finding her through her infamous TEDx talk called Risk Forward: The Rewards of Not Knowing. So Victoria Labalme, welcome to the Inner Changemaker.
I am so happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Hello, Jay.
Yes. So I know we were jamming a little bit and just riffing off record. But I always try to find every interview I do. I always try to find the best testimonials and then try to find the worst testimonials, right? just to shake things up a little bit. And I know we both know I'm really good friends with someone who's in your mastermind.
Okay.
Right? And his name is Blake. So shout out to Blake Fly. And I literally texted him not even half an hour ago. I said, Blake, I'm interviewing Victoria. I know you guys are awesome. Do you have anything that you want to tell her or you want to ask? I'll work it in for you, right? And Blake literally just wrote, "She is my fairy godmother. Tell her that."
Oh.
And so, Victoria, now that you've been doing what you've been doing for so long, how does it feel to have comments like that and to have, the people that you've worked with and the people that have really taken your work and kind of, implemented in their own lives, integrated it? How does it feel to kind of get those comments after, doing all the stuff that you've been doing the last decades?
Oh my gosh. It's really touching. It's incredibly fulfilling. I feel like the people that I've helped express, have their ideas come into the world are all over this planet. And they're all like these lights going off with their ideas, their hidden genius coming out. And it's thrilling, truly thrilling.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing to see that and to even just, see some of the body of work that you've been doing. And I know in this episode, we're going to talk about some of those things, but for people that are maybe not familiar with you, maybe they didn't get a chance to watch the TEDx talk. How did you find yourself giving, all these amazing presentations in front of thousands around the world? And how did you find yourself, giving, talk about the risk forward and the through line? Walk us through a little bit of what life was even when you were coming out of high school.
Sure. Well, coming out of high school, I was full of excitement and ideas. And then I went into college, not sure of which ones to pursue. I think a lot of us have that. Sometimes people are in a position where they go into college, they're really clear on their major and their path. And for many of us, it's not that evident. And so I went through college. I ended up as a literature major just because I looked at all the courses I'd taken. I went, well, I guess the most of them are in writing and in presenting ideas. And I went from there into the arts. I loved performing. I loved theater. And I came from a family where my mother was an academic. So I was like, being in theater was not cool. It was, you got to go study and be intellectual. And, we all have that, right? You have these parents who have an idea of what maybe you should do. And it's hard. We have those struggles. And so for me, it was a risk forward. It was a scary risk to pursue the arts. And I did that and I got into theater and I was doing comedy off Broadway, and on Broadway I got picked up by the manager for Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. I had a lot of traction and I got on Sex and the City and commercials, but everything was about me. I want to be famous. I'm going to be famous. Yeah. And then I watched 9/11 from my bedroom window, and I live in Manhattan in New York City, and I saw it. And 2 days later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and just the two of those back to back, as I often share in my story, just outside my window this sense of the world falling apart, and inside my family, our family world falling apart with my mother's diagnosis. So suddenly the fame and the attention on me didn't seem as important. And the question I asked myself that so many of us asked is, how can I help? How can I take what I have to help others? And that really shifted my career. And it was a risk for it again to leave the arts and go into a different world. But people started asking, could I teach them the skills of the arts, the comedy, the movement, the character, the connection with an audience, the storytelling, the charisma on stage to help them present their messages. And one thing led to the next. So that's been my career. I started, being on stages and sharing, and then helping people, entrepreneurs, executives, authors, artists get their message out to the world. And since then, I've done all kinds of workshops and private coaching and big events with, 17,000 in the audience, helping my clients communicate or be on Oprah or, do a small stage or a TED Talk. So that's it, is, helping people express their hidden genius. I think we all have it. I think everyone listening has it.
And I think what's so great, and for people that are watching this, you'll probably notice it, right? But I love, like, you're so expressive, especially in some of the talks, like so animated, and you're so like, you just step into that, right? Do you think that was from a lot of the training in the arts? Is that part of kind of crafting these winning presentations and stepping into that? Or have you always naturally kind of had that?
Well, I've always been pretty excitable and animated. And at the same time, I also have noticed with all my clients and people who come through my workshops that they have that too. It's like, I always say, when you're goofing around with your kids or someone else's kid, that comes out. Or, and this is the key, when you talk about what you love, no matter who you are, you light up. It's that inner light. I always say to my clients, what lights you up? And so when people, I'm very aware of body language. And when people, and this is true, think about this for yourselves as you're listening to this or watching this, is, notice what lights you up. And you think you're interested in something, but when you talk about it, like, your energy is low. And then you have a topic that maybe excites you. And even if you think it's wrong or like, oh, how am I going to do that? If it's giving you that, that's a good sign.
and I love it. I call it like geeking out.
Yeah,
right? When you can just get to the point, and it's not like you're not hustling because someone told you to hustle. You're not staying up because you believe that's the right thing to do, but you're really like, you're involved in it, and it moves you. Victoria, let me ask you this, because I know you've mentioned the concept of risk forward, right? Yes. For people that maybe not familiar with this, is this similar to kind of like, when I first heard it, I thought, maybe it's similar to like a failing forward, right? How did you stumble on this, and like what inspired you to kind of share that with that piece of you with the world?
Yes. Well, I think for me, decisions have always been challenging, and finding my way has not always been easy and clear. And I think a lot of us have that. And there's a real judgment in our world about not being clear on your goals, or, what's your plan? And there are times in life when we're not yet clear on it. And I think that's a very fertile foundation. When you're not clear, it's really important to not push yourself to decide, to be in that place. And that's the risk forward place. I feel like there's, the go for your goals and what's your plan can really hurt our hidden genius. And so years ago, when I was studying movement and mime, I studied with the great French mime, Marcel Marceau, and he would teach us this pose, which he called risque avant. And it was like risque avant, which like literally translates to risk in advance. But I took that and I thought about it. And I said, that's kind of like my philosophy of like going a little uncertain and off balance. That what is that tender place where you're a little frightened? And that is the feeling of risking forward. It's heart open, a little off balance, and heading into the unknown, and not being like, this is what I'm doing. It's more like, I'm going to try this. I'm thinking about trying this, and feeling that fear. And that's good. So you may fail, you may not fail. It's not necessarily fail forward. It's certainly not go for your goals.
Right.
It's like, it's okay not to know. And it's okay to try things out and to look for that excitement inside of you.
And that's the most exciting part about that message, right? Which is, a lot of times I think people have this addiction with having every little thing planned
Yeah.
and having it needing to be perfect, and it needs to be the perfect transition.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of risk forward is that you have to kind of make the move forward sometimes without knowing, what's on the other side, and having that fear, having those limiting beliefs there.
Right, right. And doing it, even if the odds are against you, or even if people say no, it's not about, though, blindly doing something that's irresponsible.
Yeah.
That is not something I would endorse, but it is about trusting those whispers of ideas. I always say, trust the wisps of ideas, trust your curiosity, trust your excitement, trust your interest, even if it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I always say, when your through line, which is that undercurrent within you, that sort of driving force that really knows best, when your through line is buried and you can't quite articulate it, it shows up as intuition. And so that's when you're like, I can't explain why, but I just feel like doing this. It makes no sense at all, but I can't explain it. And we often reason that away. Whatever that is walking down a certain street, or opening up a certain book, or going to a certain class. It's that, I don't know why, I can't explain it.
Have you, because I can imagine a lot of people that are listening and watching this, they might resonate. Like, they themselves have found themselves in a situation before where they didn't risk forward, right? Or they wanted to, but it never made any logical sense. So how did you, was there, a story or anything that you can think about before that, you stepped into this kind of risk forward mode, and it's fully integrated for you? Like, do you remember not having those fears, and how did you overcome those first moments of risking forward?
Yeah. Well, I should clarify that I still have them. I mean, we have them. I think if you're growing, you have them. I have them every week, where I'm like, I kind of want to do this, or I kind of want to say this. And we're constantly pushing those boundaries for ourselves. So it's not like you suddenly get through it all. I mean, it's just that you keep taking those risks, and you keep developing a new edge of a boundary. And it shows up in the smallest of ways. And what I was just talking to my stepdaughter yesterday about this, because she has this creative idea, and some of the people that are around her who are more experienced in this particular field, like, oh, you can't do that. And I said, you have to trust that inner creative idea, because it's your hidden genius. And an example I give, I think it's an important example for your audience, because it's not a huge life change one. It's more of a decision within a context. So I want to offer that here, which is that years ago, I was an outdoor instructor for a place called the Santa Fe Mountain Center. I lived in Santa Fe, and I was taking these kids. They were youth at risk. They'd been in jail and treatment centers, and I was the only one at the Santa Fe Mountain Center without a social work degree. They'd all come through masters of social work. They all had advanced degrees. They'd done psychology and counseling. I had none of that background. And so we were taking these girls out for a 2.5-week trip in the wilderness. And I said, I'm going to bring along Charlotte's Web, and I'm going to read it to them at night, the great E.B. White book. Now, I come from a literary background. I was an English major in college, as you heard. So I was like, this will be cool. I'll read them this book. It's a classic. And my co-instructor, she had a master's in social work. She's like, oh, they're not going to listen to Charlotte's Web. These are girls who've been in jail. And I thought, no, I'm going to bring it, and I also brought some purple nail polish for the girls' nails. I called it Purple Power. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, end of the trip, 2.5 weeks later, we all sit in a circle. We talk about the most meaningful parts of the trip. And 90% of them said, it was when you read Charlotte's Web to us at night. And they would get in their sleeping bags every night, and they would huddle around. And they said, no one ever read to us growing up. And that was the most meaningful part. And it stays with me, because what I'm trying to say is that you need to trust those creative ideas that you think, I can't explain why, but I think it'd be cool to bring Charlotte's Web. And a lot of people go, oh, you can't do that. We know more. We have the degrees. And that is true in a decision in your environment, whatever your work environment is. And it's true in your life. Where you I can't explain it, but I feel like I think this might be, it could be cool if. Wouldn't it be cool? So
that's awesome. As you've shared this message of risk forward, and I know you've spoken literally around the world, that you're telling me a little bit about your schedule. And, you've shared this with TEDx, and we're talking about this now. Have there ever been misconceptions on the risk forward? Have people ever interpreted that in the wrong way? What actually holds people sometimes from hearing that message and saying, okay, I'm going to trust in that, what you call the through line. I'm going to trust in, the unknown.
Right, right. Well, yeah, two misconceptions. I mean, off the bat, one is just people misunderstand what I mean by risk forward, which we touched on earlier. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, it means like go for your goals. And I go,
Yeah.
no, it's not that, because that's exactly what freaks most people out. You go to these conferences and entrepreneur, everyone's like, what's your goal? And people are like, I want to impact 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And then I'm standing in the buffet line getting my food, and people are like, what's your goal, Victoria? How many people do you want to impact? How much money do you want? I'm like, I don't think in those ways. And that's not the way I think. And there's like this kind of judgment about that. So it's not that. It's really about the creative edge. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is that there are times in my life and in all of our lives where we felt we can't. And that's because sometimes the people we look to for advice can lead us in the wrong way. It could be your life partner, or it could be a parent. And so you really need to find people that hear your inner voice, that give you not the advice of what to do, but give you the cultural environment. And I mean that one-on-one or in a group, to express your best ideas safely. And when I'm coaching people, like I run these groups, and I'm always saying, like, we can't put our ideas on this person. It's not our job to tell this person what to do, but it is our job to make it safe for them to say, I kind of think it would be cool, or I'd like to try, and pull it out of them. And so I think one of the misconceptions that gets, I don't know what the word is, not misconceptions, but it's like one of the things that really can shut us down is listening to the wrong people, or being in a place where we're forced to make a decision too quickly.
Has that ever happened to you? Like where you felt kind of like, I don't know, where everybody was saying yes or do this, and you just kind of knew it wasn't, something for you? Like, have you ever had, I guess, that own experience in your own life?
Oh, it happens every week, right?
Yeah, no, it's,
I have a whole bunch of keynotes coming up, and, some marketing pro was telling me like what I needed to do to like make the most money out of the audience. And I was like,
right.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to do it that way. And it didn't feel right. You can feel it in your chest. It's like when people give you advice, or when you're around people and you feel worse afterwards, that is not a good sign. Like you might feel frightened, but it should be like an excited frightened, like, ooh, that's kind of scary, but it shouldn't feel like, ugh. And so, when I was growing up, people thought I should go to law school because I have a very intense intellectual capacity. And because of that extreme intellect, they thought that was my path. And I also have a creative side. I paint. I have a side business in painting. I illustrate little designs. I perform. I'm very physical, as you can see. So I felt like law would really diminish that full spectrum. I call it full spectrum. We all have all those colors. And so I think one thing you all want to be aware of is when someone just sees one color in you. And that's what shuts us down. So you're always looking for how you can express the full spectrum, all your colors. Here's a little image for you. See,
nice.
And I'm covering up the through line because I actually write it as one word. So there we go.
That's so cool.
We think of ourselves as the full spectrum, and that white light is like your through line. That's the driving force. And then yourself is the prism. Your message, your keynote, your book, your podcast, and then all those colors are the different ways you express that. And you're looking for that full spectrum expression.
Yeah. And I think this is such an important thing for people to listen to re-listen to really integrate and understand. And this is something like I really struggled to understand in the beginning, which was, in the beginning when you're starting a podcast or you're figuring out what your message is, you believe that it needs to be this like singular one thing, because that's what like the best marketers, everyone's like telling you, like, what's like the one thing that you're going to like speak about? What's like, the avatar, the audience that you're going to work with. And I think in the beginning, like that is good advice, but in the beginning, it's kind of difficult to know those things.
Totally.
And it's impossible to know with like what your message is without trying and experimenting with different ways of presenting.
Yes.
Right.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And so I love that, the white light, the prism effect, of just being able to clarify and find that. And once you have kind of like the inner beings of it, like, or in the inner workings of it, yes, you can color it and you can design it in a certain way. But I think it's really kind of like, it's one of those advices like you hear, people give to people that are just starting out and beginning. I know I struggled with it so much.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And then you feel bad that you don't know, or you
Right.
pick a niche. You're like, I speak to this, or this is my topic. And then you feel
Yeah.
squished in. And then people spend a ton of money on branding and that area. And then they're like, oh, that's not really what I do.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and this is what I tell people who come to me as, a mentee or a student or a client, I say, sometimes your audience finds you. Like you think your audience is X, and it turns out that Y really resonates with your message. You don't know.
Mm.
And then also, I think what you find out with time is, who do you really like being around?
Yeah. Well, what gives you that energy, right?
Totally.
And there's so many different like analogies that come to mind, but I know one that's kind of infamous in the personal development world. It's like batteries on versus batteries off.
What does that mean? No.
So like when you hang out with someone, do they charge your battery?
Oh, that's
right?
good.
Like batteries
that.
on, or after you hang out with them, it's like kind of really depleting. Like everyone's been there where they hung out with their friend, or they were really good friends at one point, and then they felt guilty, they haven't caught up. They're like, okay, let's go catch up, let's go spend half a day together. And by like midway through, you're like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
like
totally.
I can't deal with this. I gotta get out of here.
Right.
So it's batteries on. Like, what type of person are you? What type of people are in your network?
Good. Well, a plug for you, Jay. This is a batteries on moment.
Yes, that's why you're watching the Inner Change Maker. So let me ask you this, because you mentioned this a couple times, and I think it's very important for us to address this now. Which is, you mentioned this through line,
yes,
right? And I know that you're one of the people that it's kind of like there's so many concepts in personal development, so many things that get thrown around, but I feel like you're one of the individuals that kind of like pioneered this concept through. So maybe walk us through, and maybe I should have asked this in the beginning, but the conversation was so good.
Yeah.
Through line, like how did you, like, why is it called through line?
Right. Well, the term originally it was two words originally. Through line, through line. And it came from the great Russian theater artist Stanislavski. And he designed this concept thinking that every character in a play has this driving force that moves them through the play. Like, what is that character trying to do? What are they wanting?
Yeah.
And that's their through line. And then he felt that every action in the play needs to contribute to that somehow. That keeps the spine of the play, like you think of like a fish spine, and all the bones are going in that direction. And so in life, I believe we each have a through line. And I think of our through line as your noble intent. That's a phrase I like to use, because sometimes we have a negative through line, like a through line that's driven by, I want to prove myself to my parents, or I want to be the best or the number one. And that's very ego driven. And that's a less good through line. So that's not your noble intent. Your noble intent is a through line that's driven towards helping others. So it's like, I want to inspire people, or I want to serve, or I want to help. I always say your through line is better when it's directed outwards, not towards yourself. And so I help people find their through line. I have a whole sequence of questions that helps them really find it. It's different from a purpose, because, your purpose might be to alleviate hunger in Africa, or to, end cancer. But it's really more of a life current. Like current, you think of a current that goes through a river, or a current of energy, electric, speaking of batteries. It's that energy that goes through everything you do. And it shows, and if you start to look at your life, you'll see it kind of shows up in all the places where you're most alive, whether you're in a personal environment or a professional. You're like, yeah, I'm kind of always doing that. This is the thing that connects everything I do. And it's when you're doing that, when you're connected to that current, you're really happy. And it can be misperceived by ourselves. Let me give you a really good example from my life, which is that it took me a while to figure out what my through line was, because as you heard, I was helping people with their stage presentations. I'm myself a performer. And so people said, oh, she's a presentation skills coach.
Right.
Because she helps people. And so I got hired by a ton of tech companies like Microsoft and PayPal and Polycom and Oracle and IBM. I mean, all the big tech companies started hiring me. And when I was working at the top level with these executives, these are companies with C-suite, billions of dollars on the line. I realized I wasn't that happy as I was coaching them. It was great for my ego. Like I was like, right? But I thought, why am I not so happy in these rooms? And I would sit there with these top, and I thought, you know what? It took me a while, but it was because what I love is not presentation skills coaching. What I love is helping people express their hidden genius. And I felt with some of these companies at the top level with the tech world, because it's so limited in terms of what's acceptable and what you can do on stage. And because some of them were afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
And because there were marketing and legal teams involved, there was only like a 5% window that I could really influence their whole stage presentation.
Right.
And so it wasn't fulfilling because I don't love presentations. Like people say you should coach politics. I'm like, I couldn't care less about coaching politics because most of the time it's not about their creative genius. So this is where the through line's important because it's not about your profession. It's not about what you're doing. It's what's the driving force underneath it. And that's a huge distinction. And that's what the through line is about. And it's about any given moment and helping that come through. Does that make sense?
It's powerful. It's powerful. Oh man, I have so many questions, but is it okay if I share something with you? Like,
it depends what.
Yeah, I know. We're live and you're watching this now. I'm like, oh my God. But I'm just compelled because I resonate with that personally so much. And the last couple of years, it's been awesome to kind of get my online business up and running and to kind of speak at all these podcasting conferences. And for last little while, it's just been branding myself as this person that helps business owners launch podcasts, right? Which is awesome. And it changed my life. It changed my career. And I really do believe that everyone should have a podcast to some degree, whether it's just for personal development for themselves to figure out their voice and message. And that it's just done wonders for me. But more and more, I realized that through that, it wasn't necessarily, I didn't start because I wanted to become the best podcast trainer necessarily in the world, but what I was, and this is still me refining it as I'm doing it literally like right now, which is I realized that I became really obsessed to help people find their voice and find their message. And that's what podcasting did for me more than the networking, more than the, the business consulting side of it. Right. Cause it's really awesome, but I think it's so important to, and now I talk about it all the time on the show, which is like, being a change maker is like helping you become the most effective version of yourself in the moments in life that matter. And I'm not saying I have it clarified and I've pivoted and I've refined so many different times. People that listen to the show or watch the show for any amount of time, they'll know that. But I think what you shared was so powerful.
Well, yeah. And thank you for that. And exactly, I'm sure for you, like, you're more alive when you're getting to talk about the messaging and the voice and less alive when you're talking about, say, the technology of it.
Right.
Or how do you get a lot of listeners? It's like, it's not the stuff that lights you up. You could talk about it. But the other thing that you need to know for you personally and for everyone listening is when you can communicate your through line more effectively, which you are now because you're clear on it and it's in all your marketing materials.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I said yes to being on your podcast. Because I was like, I like what he's about. And when you, whoever's listening, when you express your through line creatively in a way that's true to who you truly are, then people are attracted to you and the right people are attracted to you because it's not about the profession that you're in. It's about the way and who you are and really the driving force, the through line, the currency, the energy, the batteries on, the elements that like, there you go. I'm attracted to that kind of light. And this connects with what I believe in.
Yeah. I love that. And I accept that, Victoria. I'm super excited. I know we had this like in the works for like months. Like we're sending each other like vacation photos and things. Okay. Let me back up here a little bit. For people that are listening, watching this, they're like, you know what? I love what Jay and Victoria are talking about. I totally resonate with it. And there's, they're trying to, cause it's these like little nuances. Yes. Right? Like it's like you can conceptually almost wrap your head around it, but then like seeing it for yourself, I find that there's so many like nuances and I know you help people kind of figure this part out.
Yes.
What are maybe some of the questions or steps that people could start thinking about to kind of identify that for themselves to get a little more clarity around those nuances?
Yes. So let me ask a clarifying question about the clarifying question. Sure. What is it? Is it in terms of presenting an idea or being on stage or on video? Is it that category? I have a whole branch, as you well know, called Rock the Room. How do you rock a room? And I mean, rock a room, whether it's a webinar or a podcast, a teleseminar, a stage, a PBS. Yeah. So is it that, like, how do people start thinking about their messaging there? Or is it like in life?
I think for this question in life, if I was selfishly asking, it would definitely be the rock the room
Rock the
thing,
room.
which I know so many people have gone through it and have
Yes.
done it, and they've just rave about it,
Oh,
which
thank you.
I think is really awesome. But I think for a lot of people, sometimes like they don't know that they want to go, and because I always say like they don't have to go and put themselves on video and like do the behind the scenes stuff, and like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't have to showcase their life in that way. Right. It
Right.
just happens to be for me and for some people I know as content creators. I think it's a really great way of just like recording your own breakthroughs.
Yes.
But I think for people that they have these nuances in their life and they're trying to kind of figure out, is this like from an ego perspective, which I love that you pointed that out,
Right.
or is this something that there's an underlying tone of me wanting to be able to serve people on a different level? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is your question, how does one distinguish between the two?
Yeah.
Or
Like how does one do it in their life, which is like how do they identify or begin the process of identifying their through life with everything that they do?
I like you call it the through life.
Yeah.
The through life. The
Yeah.
through line.
The through life, you got to get to the through line to get the through life.
Yeah, exactly. So, I always say, first off, begin from within. It's one of my key phrases, begin from within.
Yeah.
And I also say, start with a question. And some of the questions I think that are valuable are, how can I? Or wouldn't it be cool if? And those two are very powerful. How can I? And the end of that sentence is something that should get you excited. Like, how can I combine dancing with science? Maybe you love those two things. Or wouldn't it be cool if I could host my business or meeting and you finish those sentences. So what you want to do is ask questions that excite you. How can I? And wouldn't it be cool if? And I have these groups that when I coach, when I'm talking about these rock the room or risk forward groups, I'm always saying, how can we go to those questions? So how can I, wouldn't it be cool if? Those two questions are very valuable. The other thing that I encourage people to do is to make note of the different passions that you have that are outside your area of expertise. So let's say you're listening to this and you know a lot about, in your case, podcasting, or you know a lot about, customer service, or you know a lot about finance or health, whatever your area is that you're developing as a skill set. And then you're thinking, outside of that, what do I love and know about? It could be bungee jumping or, photography or wine or cooking or, gardening. And then you start looking at that hybrid, meaning the hybrid, where the two overlap and where the analogies are and how you brand, as I always say, brand with your passion. It's part of this prism effect. You have all these colors. These are part of your personality, your past, the things that make you distinct. And when you start to fuse those into your business, like you love to travel, so you're like doing these shots of you like in different places. And here I am in Barcelona, and you showed me a picture of you like outside the Louvre in Paris, and that's like part of your brand. Not everyone has that. Or I have a background in movement and mime, like you heard, and so I bring that in when I teach. But it's my way. And so what makes each person distinct and makes their light bright is when you bring in the full spectrum. So that's the next question, is what are the things that I love, and how do I bring that into what I do so that it's creative and it lights me up?
I think that's so great, because I think if people really take action on this and they ask these questions, like above all else, you're just going to live a way, like you're going to live the life that you want to live.
Yes.
If you answered honestly, right?
Yeah.
And I think people I find it's like they love the hunt. They love like the chase for the life that they want to live. And they're kind of scared of stepping into that or and achieving that right away,
Right. Yeah. And what I want to say too, is you can practice in small ways with those questions. Like just today, you say, how can I make, and whatever the answer is, how can I make a special dinner scene for my husband or wife or my kid? Yeah. How can I greet that person in a cool way? Like if I have a client coming to my office, how can I make it super cool when they arrive? Like, could I put a bowl of their special food on the table? How can I, or wouldn't it be cool if I surprised them with this? You're always saying, how can I bring light and coolness to the world?
Yeah.
And that is where we have innovation. That's where we have brand distinction. That's where we find our passion. That's where we risk forward. And that's where we make a difference.
I love it. I need to have a mic. I've joked about this in previous episodes. I need to have like an actual microphone. And every time that there's like mic drop moments, just like you had, I'm like, that was a mic drop moment.
Maybe you get like a little visual effect or sound effect.
Yeah, like we'll just have one like coming into the presentation.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a last couple questions for you.
Sure.
Before we wrap up. But before, like for people that are watching this and they're loving on this, they're kind of geeking out on it. They're like, oh, I love where this conversation is going. Where could people kind of socially stalk you? I know there's riskitforward.com.
Risk Forward.
Oh, riskforward.com. And there's also victorialabalme.com, which I'm going to link both underneath this video and in the show notes. Is there other ways for people to kind of follow your work, follow your journey? I know you do so much traveling and you're up to some really cool things.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of a big believer in not overwhelming my audience with information. So when people opt in, they get information from me, but only when it's important and when it's cool. So that's nice. So I have on my webpage, if you go to victorialabalme.com, or if you cannot remember how to spell that and it's overwhelming, just go to rocktheroom.com and it'll give you where to go. So it'll just forward you. So rocktheroom.com. And I have an opt-in where you get this really cool gift of all kinds of ideas for how to find your through line and risk forward and rock the room. So all of those are embedded in that. And
that's awesome.
It's really great. It's some of the key concepts that I share and I give that away. So in this little creative piece. So that's great. You know, if people are trying to find their way and find creative edges. So I think that's pretty much a good thing to say. Rock the room, risk forward.
We're going to link everything down below and we're going to make sure people get access to that because I think that's an amazing kind of gift and especially to have you kind of as a virtual mentor, you know, in that sense. I think that's so awesome. We're talking a little bit about this like off record and, you know, the theme of the show, it's always kind of been evolving, but one of the things that I always go back to is, you know, legacy over currency, right? This idea of it. Since, you know, I know you mentioned this in the beginning and we didn't dive too deep into it, but since you kind of, you know, you said you watched, you know, 9/11 from your window and you kind of went through this intense, you know, family ordeal. It was all happening all at the same time. How do you view some of the work that you do now with, you know, risk forward and the through line? How do you view it in parts of your legacy? And do you think about that?
I do think about that. And you know, I'm at an age in my life where I'm very aware of time in a good way. You know, like, I think, you know, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, it's a different mindset. And I'm older than that. And so I'm thinking, wow, what do I want to leave in the world? And how do I want to help people? Because, you know, obviously we can't take it with us. How many homes we have and how much money we have and possessions we have, it all stays behind. So it's kind of like, I'm at a place where I want fewer things in my life physically. I almost bought another apartment and I was like, I don't need more stuff. I don't need that. So I do think of that. And on the note of finance, I have found in my career again and again, when I have not focused on it per se, I think it's important to know these elements, to understand how people buy. But whenever I've come from a place of service, my business has grown and it's been bigger than I thought. And you know, when I think it's going to be X amount, it's X times 2 or X and a half. When I've come from a place of service, whether it's a keynote fee or a coaching, it's giving more, it's adding value. I'm never charging by the minute. I'm happy to go over the timeline to make sure that people get what they want. And that comes back in such spades, you know. I can give you tons of examples of that, but by focusing on legacy and by focusing on caring, and legacy not in an ego way, but legacy in terms of service. Yeah. It's like led to currency. So go figure.
Yeah. I love that. And I was recently reading one of my friends. He's a really big YouTuber. He does all these like top 10 rules. Right. So he'll do like a top 10 of like Elon Musk or top 10 Steve Jobs. And people probably know who I'm referring to. But I was reading he gave me like an early copy of his book, actually, right over here. There's all these like notes in it.
It's so exciting.
Yeah. And anyways, I was reading the one of Steve Jobs last night. and there's like a top 10 quotes or top 10 moments of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And one of the ones was, I think it was like the president of Dell, or president, or like there was a CEO. No, it was the new, at the time it was like the CEO of Nike. And they said, oh, I got on a call with Steve Jobs. And I asked him, do you have any advice for me? Right? Like I just took this ride.
Right.
I don't remember the name of the guy. And he said, Steve said, no. And then he thought, they hesitated. And then Steve said, actually, I do have like one piece of advice for you. And his piece of advice to the CEO of Nike at the time was, don't make and sell crap.
I love that.
You know, you got to honor, right, the big brand. And he was explaining a little, like Nike represents, you know, the top echelon of this. So like, you got to make sure to adhere by that.
Yes.
And I don't know, for some reason that stuck out more to me than, you know, we all know Steve Jobs for all the amazing, you know, charismatic, you know, presentations on everything. But I think underneath it all, he knew that he wanted to create that quality.
Yeah.
Right? And it just reminded me so much of what you just shared.
Yeah. And I think in the end, I mean, not only does it carry your brand forward, because people do find that stuff out. And in a world where there is so much crap being produced, people really are amazed when you go the extra mile. I mean, when we do our events or when I coach or something, you know, it's like we care. And I lose money in that process, not in the end, but I put money out of my pocket back in because I care about people. And I do it because it's the right thing to do, but it ends up spreading. People are like, that was amazing. So I think you shouldn't be afraid to invest back in to make sure people get quality. And that alone is good for them. It also just makes you feel great.
Yeah.
My father, when I was growing up, he said, don't serve bad alcohol at parties. You know, he used to buy the top quality instead of buying the bottom of the basement, you know, scotch and vodka. He'd always buy top shelf. And people were like, wow, he's serving, you know, Belvedere or whatever it was. And, you know, he said in the end, how much? It's a few extra dollars. But the impression it leaves, you know, it's huge. So I
love it.
Buy top shelf, be top shelf.
Yeah. Buy top shelf alcohol. We're going to throw an affiliate link. I'm joking. So Victoria, I've loved this conversation. I think people that are listening, watching this, I hope you guys have gotten a lot out of it. And I want to end with this question, which is, you know, the name of the show, it's called The Inner Changemaker.
Yeah.
What comes to your mind, Victoria? Images, words, anything. What comes to your mind when you think of the word changemaker?
I think it's someone who's not trying first and foremost. It's more someone who already is that way. And I think it's like when we try too hard, it becomes about us. And it's more, what are you compelled to do? You know, what pulls you forward? And it's what is that current inside of you? What I said earlier, it's like, what are you compelled to do? Mark Knopfler, the great, you know, guitarist for the Dire Straits. I'm a big Dire Straits fan, big Mark Knopfler fan, talked my way backstage years ago, whole separate story. But I got back there and, you know, I was asking for advice. I was in my 20s. I was lost. And he said, do what you're compelled to do. And I sometimes say to clients, it's not just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because everyone else thinks it's a good idea doesn't mean it's right for you. It's what are you compelled to do? And that's where change begins. It's you're pulled forward. You can't not do it.
I love it. And I love it. And I just want to take a few seconds before we just kind of end the entire broadcast and the video, the episode, to just acknowledge you, Victoria, for being a great example of that, of being a great example of someone who advocates for that, you know, took that leap of faith on yourself and your gifts. And I think that the reason I asked you to be on the show is because I wanted you to share that. And it comes up so present with, you know, your the way that you speak and the way that you kind of come through and it's honest. And I appreciate that about you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I want to leave with a final thought if I can before we end.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please do. Yeah.
Do we have a minute?
No, yeah, we got a minute. There's a countdown going on.
So years ago, I was after my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she used to put up these beautiful bouquets above the fireplace. And I know you talk about life's work, and she used to call this bouquet her life's work. And I said to her, you know, Mom, why do you call this your life's work? Like, it's just flowers, you know. And she would go around the property and grab, and, you know, branch here and a flower here. And she said, well, in the dying light of the day, which was profound because she'd just been diagnosed with cancer. But she said, in the dying light of the day, I go around the property, I gather what I have, and I do the best with what I have. And that's my life's work. And I think that's our life's work. We do the best with what we have.
Wow. And I hope that for people that are listening and watching this, I mean, please integrate this. Please take action on some of these questions and go follow Victoria. Share this episode. We'd love to hear some feedback. Because I mean, I got some goosebumps right after that last comment there and that last story. And I hope people get a chance to, step into that for that through line for themselves, and do their best. I love so many parts of that, Victoria.
And let me know you're welcome. Let me know how I can help. I'm working on a book about this and I need to learn from all of you, what you want to know and where you're struggling. Let me know how I can help.
Yeah, we're going to tag everything in the show notes and the things. Please feel free. If you got any value out of this, feel free to reach out to us. Love to hang out with you guys more in the virtual space. Victoria, once again, thank you so much for being here, welcome. For being an amazing, change maker yourself. And remember, guys, until I see you guys next week, it's not about changing the world. It's really about becoming the most effective version of yourself in the moments in life that matter the most. And we hope you guys got some value out of this. And we can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.
Okay.
Bye.